Before starting, at the outset, I would like to thank our Madam Principal, Dr. N. Bhuvaneshwari, for having given me permission to do this program. I thank my head of the department, Madam Mrs. P. Sylvie, for motivating me. Once again, I thank you, Madam, for your kindness and support. Thank you, ma'am. Happy morning to all of you. Myself, Mrs. Nagapushpam, Assistant Professor, PG and Research Department of English, Arulmigu Palaniyandar Arts College for Women, Palani, happily welcome you all to the second day celebration of Women's Equality Day 2020. Women's Equality Day commemorates 26th August 1920 when votes to women officially became part of the US Constitution. This day marks a turning point in the history of the struggle for equal treatment of women and women's rights. How to celebrate Women's Equality Day? That's the question. There are a number of different ways that you can celebrate Women's Equality Day. One of the best things to do on this day is to pay tribute to the amazing females that have made a massive difference in the movement. Spend some time doing research online to educate yourself further on the matter. You can spread information with your friends, family members, and followers online so that you can increase awareness amongst all of your loved ones. So, through this online program, we hope the information we spread will be useful to you. Here is the resource person who is going to continue the session today. Topic of the day, competing on the battlefront, examining women's poetry during the First World War. I am much happy to invite the resource person, Ms. Smiktakshi Chowdhury, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, LJD College, Falta, Kolkata. And at last, I would like to quote, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world." Once again, on behalf of the PG and Research Department of English, Arulmigu Palaniyandar Arts College for Women, and also as the coordinator of this program, I invite you all to the second day celebration of Women's Equality Day. Thank you.
Let us now turn our thoughts towards the women who served as nurses during the First World War. Their contribution, as you can imagine, is immense. But then it is not acknowledged as much as it should be, nor is the variety in their writings really spoken about. I think it's very important that I draw your attention to this fact. Professional army nurses left for the front within days of the war being declared. Members of the Voluntary Aid Detachments, or the VAD, and those who held the Red Cross nursing certificates were very quick to offer their services, initially for home duties. A relatively small number eventually served in base or general hospitals overseas, but never in casualty clearing stations. In this poem that I am going to read out, the nurse praises a soldier's courage. The name of the poem is Pluck, which means courage or bravery. Crippled for life at 17, his great eyes seemed to question why. With both legs smashed, it might have been better in that grim trench to die. So this nurse is tending to a boy soldier who is just who is just 17 years old, and his legs have been smashed. He has been crippled for life, and his eyes are big, and they seem to question why. It would have been better to die in that trench, perhaps. This is perhaps the thought going through his mind, because at 17 he has lost the use of both of his legs. It might just have been better to die than live on like that. A child so wasted and so white. The nurse calls him a child. So broke with pain, he shrinks in dread, see the dresser drawing near. He is in a lot of pain, obviously, and as he sees the dresser draw near, the dresser was basically the person who tended to the wounds of these soldiers, changed the bandages quite a few times a day. He's shaking, strangled sobs you hear. After all, he's just a boy. But when the dreaded moment's there, he'll face us all, a soldier yet. But when the moment of action arrives, he is steadfast. He tries to show how courageous he is. He composes himself. Watch his bared wounds with unmoved air. He sits very still and watches his naked wounds, though telltale lashes still are wet, and smoke his wood-wine cigarette. This is a poem by Eva Dogwell, and it is necessary that I speak a bit about this particular action. Dressings were the most dreaded part of the day for the patients as well as the nursing personnel. There is a reason, because this was an era when antibiotics did not exist. So to prevent infections or the dreaded gangrene, wounds had to be infected often twice daily with powerful antiseptics such as iodine or carbolic. A frequently painful process, in which both parties knew that this pain would have to be endured. The soldiers were sometimes given these cigarettes as nerve soothers so that they calmed down when this painful dressing process took place. This is the reason why the boy of 17 is smoking a cigarette, to calm himself down, to distract himself from the pain that was about to come. This was not the only painful scene which the nurses saw on a daily basis. There were also internal conflicts. Why do I say internal conflicts? Because it is not just the maimed soldiers on your side that you had to treat. There were also the prisoners of war, soldiers who had been captured from the enemy side, from the opposition. They were brought back as prisoners of war, and they were also in most cases terribly wounded. They would also have to be tended by these nurses. But how to maintain neutrality, which was expected from the nurses, and treat a soldier who happened to be from the enemy's side? Doing their duty must have been very difficult. There's a nurse called Vera Brittain who was assigned for duty in the dreaded German prisoners' ward. But she soon came to accept that soldiers from opposing sides, shared a common humanity. Nurse Vera Brittain wrote a poem watching another nurse at work. In the poem, she says, "I shall think of how I work for her with nerve and heart and mind, and how the dying enemy her tenderness would find beneath her scornful energy of will." Vera is admiring the work of another nurse who has calmed herself down, and she's working with a lot of determination on relieving the pain of a German soldier who is almost dying. That dying soldier, maybe he will not survive, but he's receiving the care and affection of the nurse who is tending to him. And I learnt that human mercy turns alike to friend or foe when the darkest hour of all is creeping nigh. When the hour is the darkest, it matters not if someone is a friend or an enemy. Human mercy, tends to the friend as well as the enemy. These horrors took a considerable toll on nursing personnel, of course, leading to a number of them suffering mental breakdowns, of course, and some of them even committed suicides. But no poem, no poem is ever, no poem was ever written to deal with the subject of shell-shocked nurses or agonized nurses, although shell-shocked soldiers frequently appear in women's poems, as we have seen in one example that I have read out. Alright, let us now go on to another section. During the Great War, over 100,000 British women joined the countless official and semi-official women's organizations established or extended to assist the war effort. Many formed by women themselves. Some volunteered for a few hours weekly, others spent years overseas. A substantial number were within the earshot of the guns for longer than many revered soldier poets and writers. But do we talk about their experiences? We don't. We talk about the experiences of only the male poets. Most felt in Women's Auxiliary Army Corps poet one, Greenlay's words that their khaki uniform was significant, a visible sign of their contribution to the war effort. The following lines provides a vivid picture of the horrific conditions under which the women both traveled to and subsequently worked on the Eastern Front, caring for Serbian and Romanian soldiers, countries the names of which they were not even aware of before 1914. This poem by Miss Mary Henderson, who worked as the administrator of the Scottish Women's Hospitals, is named like that. And I will read out a few lines from this poem. I've seen you kneeling on the wooden floor, tending your wounded on their straw-strewn bed. I've seen you guiding over shell-marked ground, dauntless, clear-eyed, strong-handed, even when the bullets flung the dust up from the road. I have seen you, O my sisters, under fire, while in your hearts there burned but one desire, what British men and women hold so dear, to do your duty without fear. So women would be frequently traveling on roads where bombs might have struck a few minutes back. They might have guided the passage of patients or wounded men under the rain of bullets or gunfire. But they did their duty without fear. Another volunteer nurse called Mary Bowden looks at the conditions in which the French soldiers, many of whom would become her patients, served. So this once again talks about the conditions under which the soldiers fought the war. I'm reading out a few lines from the poem. This is the mud that clothes him. His trousers and boots are of mud, and his skin is of mud, and there is mud in his beard. His head is crowned with a helmet of mud. He wears it well. He wears it as a king. Why is this talk about mud so important? Heavy contamination owing to the extensive pre-war usage of fertilizers, decaying dead bodies, and the use of thousands of gas shells resulted in the thick mud of the battlefields, posing a great threat to the wounded. Death by sepsis was common, and nurses as well as soldiers were at risk from deadly infection. Thus, this nurse lauds the bravery of the soldiers working in these fields, battlefields or trenches, consisting of thick mud. They were at great risk of being, infected, especially if they were wounded. The members of the voluntary aid detachments or VADs usually served at home, but they were always under the supervision of a professional nurse. But with the ratio of patients to professional nurses constantly increasing as casualties went up during the war, additional responsibilities were handed over to these VADs. Night duty was a time when these volunteers' skills and they would be often stretched to the limits. Patients and staff were at their most vulnerable during these hours. In this poem, you get a very grim picture of the mental condition of these personnel who had to be up at all hours, lest a patient need them. And all are wrapped away in secret sleep and dreams. Here she talks about the patients who are sleeping or dreaming. But suddenly, here one cries out a sobbing breath, gripped in the clutch of some incarnate fear. What terror through the darkness draweth near? What memory of carnage or of death? So the soldiers who are admitted in the hospitals, they would often dream about the killing on the battlefields, and maybe one of them you know cried out in his sleep. So the nurse asks, what terror of darkness are you dreaming about? What carnage and what death scenes they rise in front of your eyes? And one laughs out with an exultant joy. An athlete he, maybe his young limbs strain in some remembered game, and not in vain, to win his side the goal. Poor crippled boy, who in the waking world will never run again. This is a very, very pathetic description. She's talking about a boy who is laughing out loud in his sleep. Maybe he's dreaming of happier times when he was an athlete. Maybe he is dreaming about a game in which he was involved with his friends, trying to win a goal for his side. This athlete, his life was cut short at 17. He's described as a poor crippled boy of 17, and he had to come to the war front, and he had to serve his country. However, he is crippled for life now, and he will never walk again. The contrast between his happy dreams and his ghastly reality is pathetic. But this was the reality in the nursing units in the hospital wards during the night. But one of the popular, although inaccurate, myth about the surrounding VADs is that volunteers always served in a nursing capacity. This was not true. Many of them were cooks, scullery and ward maids. But there is an irony here too. These units generally recruited from the upper classes of society. So many of these women who came to work as nurses or as cooks or scullery maids, back home, they belonged to families where they would have servants at their command. But look at their life now. Some of those whose services was in the kitchen or pantry captured their new life in poetry, showing how the sheer reality of grappling with, recalcitrant equipment could come close to lowering the spirits of even the most dedicated war workers. But even, those who worked in the kitchens or somewhere else, the equipments that they worked with, the kitchen ranges that they worked with, were often very, very inadequate. They were frequently frustrated because of that. This anonymous poet from Gallow Hill Auxiliary Hospital in Paisley vents her frustration on the kitchen range on New Year's Eve. What a terrible way to spend New Year's Eve. She's sitting in the kitchen and talking to the utensils that she uses on a daily basis. You were so dirty. Old range refers to the the kitchen range that she used for cooking. Though you no more I'll clean, I hope till 1970. And though I send you, well, to Jean, there's no ill will. So apparently this woman who is working in the kitchens has been posted somewhere else and she's moving on. And on New Year's Eve, she's talking to the kitchen range and telling the kitchen range that I am handing you over to another person, to another girl named Jean, who will come and look after you, who will work with you. But I have no feeling of ill will towards you. Because together we have been in Gallow Hill, home of our wounded Tommies, where I nurse, dust, cook without a care. There's one I bless because I'm there, our commandant. But even though I take on so many roles, I nurse, I dust, I cook. You can see the range of services that a single woman would be expected to perform. There was such shortage there. But she never complained, uh, because it is the home of the wounded Tommies, the wounded soldiers, and she was serving them, so there is no ill will. Even though she may have had a very hard time with the outdated kitchen utensils and dirty kitchen ranges. We will now move on to the next unit. This is a very interesting part. The First Aid Nursing Yeomanry, or FANY, First Aid Nursing Yeomanry, the acronym is FANY or FANY, was amongst the most decorated and successful of the women's units. Formed in 1907, the organization aimed to provide assistance to civil and military authorities in times of emergencies. One form of assistance would be to gallop onto the battlefield to rescue casualties or dead bodies or wounded soldiers. Having driven for the Belgian army from the outset on January 1, 1916, Fanny's became the first women to drive ambulances officially for the British Army. Known to drive like bats out of hell when traveling to collect the wounded, on the return journeys to the hospital, their patience, gentleness, and consideration for those in their care was legendary. Because, of course, when you are going to collect wounded soldiers or dead soldiers, you would have to rush, you would have to drive at a breakneck speed. But while coming back, you would have to be considerate to the fact that there are wounded soldiers in your car. So you would often have, they would often have, often have to drive very slowly to take care that there are no unnecessary bumps or something like that. So not only did they drive the ambulances, they also maintained and serviced these vehicles themselves, and their mechanical skills were highly and deeply respected. Some Fannies poetically contrasted the humor and harshness of wartime life with their pre-war existence. Like I said, these services often, recruited from the upper sections of the society. So many of these women came from well-to-do families, and they would have a very normal life. They would have lived a very normal life prior to the outbreak of the war. They would have gone out, socialized with their friends, gone to ballroom parties, went for movies with their friends. But now their reality was in sharp contrast to their carefree life before the war. This poet, who terms herself one of the saints, looks wryly back to her time as a socialite, comparing this to her life in France during the grim winter of 17 to 18. So this poem is quite interesting. She writes, "I wish my mother could see me now, with a grease gun under my car filling, atop of a sheet of frozen iron." I wish my mother could see me now, because she's used to seeing me dress up in, very beautiful gowns maybe, and go out with my friends and, party. But now my reality is something different. I'm driving what? I'm driving a sheet of frozen iron. The car or that ambulance is called a sheet of frozen iron. So cold it is, In cold that would make you cry. Why do we do it? You ask. Why? We are the Fanny. I used to be in society once, danced, hunted and flirted once, had white hands and complexion once. Now I am a Fanny. So she draws attention to her life prior to the war, and now she says that you ask why I would leave such a life and then join this service? I used to be in society once, I had a different reality once, but now I am a member of this unit, and I am helping to rescue the wounded soldiers from the battlefield. My mother should see me now. and obviously her mother, if she saw what the daughter was doing, would have an existential crisis because she would not have expected her daughter to drive a car in that kind of cold and be doing war work on the front lines. But of course, like most other services rendered by women during this era, this is also largely ignored. I would like to talk about another service which is largely ignored. It is the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps, which was established in 1917 with the aim to free up a man for the front. What did this mean? This basically meant that the women who would be recruited would be performing domestic or housekeeping roles for the army officers, and they were usually, as a result of that, recruited from the lower classes of the society. They did not have the same access to publishers later on when their when the turn came to publish their poetry. Like the other units, they did not have access to publishers, with the result that much of their poetry has been lost. One very interesting thing that I want to share with you is that when this service was established, such was the prevailing notions of morality in society, such were the notions of sexism in society, that the press immediately carried some very derogatory stories. They said that these women would be in close proximity to the army men. They would be very close to the men because they would be doing the housekeeping in the living quarters, which meant that these men who are away for so many months on the battlefield, their morality might be jeopardized, coming in such close contact to the women. But what to do? What to do about that? So the press suggested that the WAAC uniform should not be made very appealing. They should be made khaki colored. They should be made khaki colored, of course, but they should not be very fashionable. They were given khaki colored coat frocks, very clumsy looking shoes, and a round brown felt hat, to give them some amount of patriotic fervor. But the women heard all these stories and they were not discouraged. In this very touching poem by one such woman, she writes, "My comrades sniff and sneer about my hat. Their idle words do not excite my rage." So they sneer at me and at the work that I am doing, maybe even at my morals. But their idle words do not make me angry. Why? For there is no dishonor in the work that I do. For 7 months now, this hat has braved the blast, and certainly it is somewhat worn and frayed. So what? So what if my hat looks so old? It is worn and frayed, I know, but for 7 months, this hat has been in service. This hat has served me. It has been there with me by my side. And certainly it is someone worn and frayed, upholding not the beauty, but the worth. So it is not the beauty that should be the consideration here, but look at the worth. It is upholding not the beauty, but the worth of that from which an army hat is made. So my hat has been made from the same material that is used to make a soldier's hat. But even though the quality of my hat is very inferior, it is still serving the army. It is still serving the country. It is old and scarred, but what care I for that? I am very proud to wear my army hat. I am extremely proud to be wearing this hat and, serving my country. The next section, and the last section that we will be speaking about, the last unit that we will be discussing about, is the Women's Land Army. So what led to the formation of the Women's Land Army? By 1917, the food situation had reached a crisis point once again. The government employed one of its favorite methods of, hectoring the population, which was, putting out posters instructing women to engage in national service and to speed the plow. So demonstrations came up, and those who owned the land or those who wished to serve the country were asked to were asked to become members of the officially recognized Women's Land Army under the leadership of Lady Denman and Muriel Talbot. Women were given a khaki uniform unless they were working in the dairies where the uniform was white in color, to indicate that they too were soldiers. These women were eager to contribute their labor and saw their service only in patriotic terms. So one poet, serving in this unit of the Women's Land Army by the name of K.M.E. Godley, writes, "We were summoned from the city, from the cottage and the hall, from the hillside and the valley. What did we do? We answered the call. For we are fighting for our country as we till the fertile soil, and our king and country need our help and asks for earnest toil. Keep the home crops growing in the soft winds blowing through your work that seems at times hard and in vain. But you have to keep working at it because you are serving your country. Some are milking cows for England, some are engaged in dairy service, some the giant oak trees split, some are splitting or cutting down trees for firewood or something like that. We are working for our country and we are glad to have the chance. By increasing England's food supplies to help our boys in France, keep the home flags flying, England's food supplying, help to bring our gallant lads victorious home." So ultimately they saw their service in very patriotic terms, and they were glad, even though that the toiling on the land and the very business of sowing crops, it sometimes proved to be very hard on women who were not used to working in the fields, but they still stepped up and did their service. How many of us know about the existence of such a unit? Not even their service and their contribution, their sacrifice comes much later. We don't even know that such a unit existed during the time of the First World War. With that, I hope that I have been able to show you that women were not the passive sobbing entities that they were perceived to be during World War I. Those who stayed back entered a wide array of services that ultimately helped the army to survive. Some were engaged in knitting woolens, like we discussed. Some were engaged in food production. Some entered the munitions factory, at great personal risk, like I told you. And some were also, contributing to the war loans out of their own meager income, even if they could not afford a comfortable meal themselves. Then we come to the women who were serving in the units on the battlefield. They were not in any capacity lesser than the men who fought during the war. Without their contribution, the men would not have survived. Without the nurses, without the housemaids, without any of the services for that matter, the war would not have been won. And it is essential to recognize and laud the achievements and contributions and sacrifices of these women. It is a category of poetry that I accidentally discovered, and this became very close to my heart after I read that anthology of poems of women writers during the World War I era. And this is not something that is usually spoken about. So I thought, what better occasion than International Women's Equality Day to bring such an issue to light, to give my viewers some information about the existence of these these brave women who were working at par with the men. And they were fighters in their own right, and their contribution, like I said, is not lesser than any soldier who sacrificed his life for his country, or who valiantly fought during the war. Uh, with that, I hope that this has been an enriching experience for you, and I must thank the authorities of the college for giving me the opportunity to speak about a subject that is so close to my heart. And once again, I must maintain that I am honored to have been invited as a guest speaker on this occasion. Thank you everyone for having the patience to hear me out, and thank you once again. Nandri.